Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending where you are. We're all going to have some fun today with GMAT Verbal. We're going to really dig into the game and how to really nail it, learn some key things that we can use to totally destroy GMAT Verbal on test day. If you can hear me out there, let me know by telling me where you're from, what challenges you're having in GMAT Verbal, anything you want to know, some comments. I'm ready to rock today, and I'm so excited about this topic because I think it's going to take a lot of people over the top in GMAT Verbal and really help you see some key things you can do. So let's hit the presentation. Let's get this going. Let's start the game. Okay, so the key thing we're talking about here today, and let me get to the first slide, is GMAT Verbal tips for thinking like a V51 scorer. Now, we don't all have to score a V51 on GMAT Verbal, but the idea today is that we're going to learn to think like a V51 scorer, to become more like a V51 scorer, and maybe score a V51, but certainly get into the 40s or even the mid 40s on GMAT Verbal. And what we're going to see is that there's a whole set of thought processes and algorithms and other things that we can bring to bear, and they all come together to help us nail all aspects of GMAT Verbal. So this whole way of thinking, you're going to see it. It has to do with you, how you see the test, okay, how you see even the world, right? So all this thinking comes together to help you really nail GMAT Verbal on test day. And I'm seeing some people asking some questions, so we're definitely going to hit some critical reasoning today. We're going to go through a couple different questions, and we're going to talk in general and specifically about how to think like a V51 scorer. Okay, so the first thing let's talk about is that there's two main aspects of thinking that underlies high performance, okay? Two main aspects. One of them is your beliefs, okay? You're going to say, what do my beliefs have to do with it? But what we believe colors what we do and how we act, right? And we act on our beliefs. And of course, if you believe something that's incorrect, then what you do is not going to be effective. And if you believe something semi-correct, it's going to be more effective. And if you really nail it, if your beliefs are a certain way, it's going to be much easier to accomplish things. So part of what we're going to talk about here today is our beliefs. The second thing is strategies. So what goes along with our beliefs, of course, is strategies. And by the way, our strategies are based on our beliefs. Like if you believe, well, I can never score a V51 or above 40 on GMAT Verbal, your strategy is going to be to stop and quit before you get there, right? I mean, that's a simple example. But let's talk about some other beliefs and strategies to start laying the foundation of the type of thinking we want to do to really absolutely nail the verbal section of GMAT, okay? Let's talk about some low performance beliefs first. Okay, one is that details don't really matter. You know, and you might think, well, I don't believe this. The details don't really matter. But it's easy enough for any of us, like including me, to start thinking, you know, these details don't really matter. This is too much. I just need to get the surface or the big picture. But sometimes details do matter, right? So, but one of the low performance beliefs we can have that I see a lot with students is on some level, we think the details don't really matter. Who cares? I'll deal with this, you know. Okay, so that's one of the low performance beliefs. Another one that we see a lot on GMAT Verbal is, if experts say it, I should just accept it. I see this all the time. People go, oh yeah, the first version of a sentence and a sentence correction question is the important version. The other sentence versions have to match that one. An expert told me that. Well, is that belief really going to work for us? We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Another belief that can mess us up, of course, is the test prep is inevitably boring. Of course, if we think something is inevitably boring, we're going to find it a slog, we're going to find it challenging. So that belief could really slow us down. Another one that really slows people down is that getting a high score on the GMAT, especially in verbal, is the result of luck. It's all luck. I see that pretty regularly. Oh, you know, getting anything above a 720 or a 740, it's all luck. Really? Well, then why would you even try? How about this? Now let's go to some more general beliefs, like such as some things will be ever beyond my capacity to understand them. It's an interesting, right? It's an interesting. It sounds so philosophically Correct. Some things will be forever beyond our capacity to understand them. Really? Really? That's a question. That's a funny belief. We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Some problems can never be solved. This is another low performance belief. You think, well, some problems can't be solved. Well, this is going to block you in solving problems or solving anything, because you think that even if you're trying to solve this problem over here, if you think that this other problem over here that's connected to it can never be solved, then you're going to have a harder time solving the one you're trying to solve, because things are so connected. So some problems can never be solved. Why are we talking this for GMAT Verbal? Well, what if you believe that some problem you have with studying can never be solved, or some problem you never have with your job can never be solved, or some problem you have with a family member can never be solved? Don't you think this could affect how you prepare for GMAT Verbal? And a final belief that's specific to this is, I have a score ceiling. This belief is, well, what is this? You can tell that if you think you have a score ceiling, that belief is going to keep your performance below what you think your score ceiling might be, right? Okay, so let's talk about the contrasting beliefs, the high performance beliefs that we're going to use to start thinking like a V51 score. One of them is that details absolutely do matter, okay? At least in GMAT Verbal, we really have to pay attention to the details. So if you find yourself blowing off the details, I think I got this, I read it enough, I get it, probably we have to start thinking that the details do matter. A second one is, I have to evaluate what so-called experts say. This is so true. I see it so much. Someone will come to me in the course, in the chat, and say, so-and-so said that this pronoun doesn't really work this way. And I say, well, is that really logical? Does it really make sense that that would be true? Maybe we need to evaluate what that expert is saying, okay? So when you're going and preparing for the GMAT, I encourage you to evaluate what so-called experts, including me, say, okay? Because once in a while, an expert says something that's really important and it's also wrong, okay? So you have to consider what makes sense. And this is a huge part of scoring V51 on the GMAT, or above 40 or whatever in verbal, is figuring out what makes sense. This is a big part of thinking like a V51 score. Does an expert say it, but does that really make sense? Okay, let's continue. Another one is, I can find ways to make test prep interesting and enjoyable. This is a great belief to have. And it's true. You can find a way to make practically anything enjoyable. And test prep is a game. You're learning all these different things, right? So you can figure out ways to make it interesting and enjoyable. It may not be perfect. It may not be your favorite thing, but you can make it more interesting or less interesting. So we shoot for more interesting, right? Fourth thing, getting a high score is the result of figuring out what it takes to score high and doing it. So this is the contrast with getting a high score is luck. Look, you can get a high score by doing what it takes. And I can tell you from experience, I had no idea when I started preparing for the GMAT that people didn't score 800 regularly. So I figured, well, I'm going to go and start teaching the GMAT, so I should probably get a perfect score. So I figured out what it takes, and I got a perfect score. And it wasn't, I didn't know that people didn't normally do that. I just executed. I figured out what it took. I prepared effectively, and I got the score. Okay, so now our general beliefs. Number one, I can learn to understand anything, right? Look, I don't care what there is in the universe. We can always expand our mentality and learn to understand it, and that includes the minutia of GMAT Verbal. Next, any problem is solvable. I mean, do you agree with this? If you disagree with this, I really want you to think about it. Why would there be any problem in the world that is not solvable, okay? And this goes for these beliefs in general. Any of these beliefs you find yourself disagreeing with, you really want to think, well, should I be disagreeing with? Maybe this is what's slowing me down. Like, I don't think I can learn to understand anything. I think that some problems aren't solvable. I think there's things that I can't do. I think that I do have a score ceiling, right? Well, if you're saying those things, these are the beliefs we're talking about, okay? So if you're arguing with me, feel free to contact me in the TTP chat and say, like, look, I disagree with you. We can argue about it, because it's really important to get these beliefs solid, to think like a V51 score, to get the virtuous cycle that's going to get you to your score goal. Finally, I can develop myself without limit. This is a huge one, right? I don't have a score ceiling. I can just keep developing myself. And this completely makes sense, right? You started off at some level when you were first born. You learn this, you learn that. You keep getting better at everything. Why couldn't you just keep getting better and better and better at anything you do, right? So that's a key belief. And here's the thing. This is all going to underlie a virtuous cycle, even when you're answering a question. even in the middle of answering a verbal question, if you think any problem is solvable, you're going to think differently about that question from how you will if you don't think any problem is solvable. If you're in the middle of a question, you say, some problems aren't solvable, I can't ever understand this. Of course, it's going to slow you down. So you might think, well, this is so general. What does it have to do with GMAT Verbal? But all these beliefs are acting on you at all times. When you're preparing, when you're taking the GMAT, if you think you have a score ceiling and you're taking the test, you're anxious. You're like, wait, I might be hitting my score ceiling. Oh, no. But if you think I don't have a score ceiling, I can develop myself without limit, then when you're answering a practice question or taking this test, you're like, oh, I can do this. I can get it done. I'm going to figure out how, okay? So this is the foundation of our thinking to totally nail this section. Okay, so here's some of the strategies based on the beliefs. The belief that details don't matter underlies the strategy of not paying attention to details. The belief that details do matter underlies the strategy of paying attention to details, which gets us our high score. The belief that getting a high score is a result of luck underlies the strategy of half-heartedly preparing, right? Like, well, I don't know, it's all going to be luck anyway. If you believe that you can score high is because the result of doing what it takes, it underlines a strategy of doing whatever it takes. You're going to go through, you're going to find new levers to pull, you're going to keep figuring out better ways to get better at it, and you're going to nail it. And these, once again, the score ceiling, as we were talking about, okay, if you think you have a score ceiling, your strategy is basically going to be to give up when you get to a plateau. And if you think you can develop yourself without limit, your strategy is going to be to keep pulling levers until you do. So this is the mentality we want to have at the foundation of our thinking to nail GMAT Verbal and nail the GMAT in general. Okay, so let's get, here, let's talk about, okay. So here are our key strategies. Our key strategies are, number one, we're going to pay attention to details. Number two, and this is another key strategy of V51 scorers, right? We pay attention to yellow flags. And we're going to see this. We're going to do some practice questions in a few minutes. Paying attention to yellow flags. And this is whether it's an expert says something or a question says something or anything else. You're reading an answer choice and there's a little inner voice in your head going, did you notice that you didn't read the whole choice? Paying attention to those yellow flags can really save you, and that's the kind of thing. It's going to help so much in everything you're doing. You're going, oh, this is right. Wait, you're going to have a little inner voice in you. And this is really key to high scorers. They can say, wait a minute, did I really pay attention to choice B? Some little inner voice is saying I didn't, okay? And if you can listen to that little inner voice, it's going to get you higher in your score. You're constantly considering whether things make sense. We've already discussed this, right? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Does this passage make sense? Does my thinking make sense? Does this expert say it makes sense? Does this explanation make sense? What makes sense, okay? People come to me asking all kinds of questions about parallelism and this and that. And what's funny is, well, you sure this what you're saying makes sense? It's so interesting, the things that we can think make sense. And I do the same thing. We all have to learn to, okay, does that really make sense? Another one, never being satisfied with not understanding. You want to nail this test? Never be satisfied with not understanding. You get to a question to understand, you don't understand choice D? Well, read that choice and figure it out until you do understand it. And it's better to do 8 questions a day or 3 questions a day and fully understand them. Never be satisfied with not understanding. That's what's going to drive your score up, because when you understand, then you're making progress. Next, being relentless, okay? Relentless, okay? And I mean, this got me so far. When I was a kid, I got an award for being the most determined. And, I think that's what gets me the answers to GMAT questions maybe more than anything else. It's just being totally relentless to identify and articulate what's going on in the question, okay? So, like, if you're having trouble with the test and you're wondering what's going on, maybe you're just not being relentless enough. I've seen people go, I was in a bad mood about my quant section, so I really nailed the verbal section and went so harder than ever, and I scored way higher than usual. Why? Because the person is being relentless and doing the next thing too, maintaining intensity, okay? You got to maintain intensity, whether you're preparing, and especially when you're taking the test, you have to maintain intensity. And I'll tell you what, I've been doing this for years, right? And when I'm preparing for a session like this or for a webinar and I'm going through questions real quick and C's the answer, because I'm not maintaining intensity, I can miss the question just as easily as anyone else. Maintaining intensity, right? When you're taking the test, you're not going, oh, I'm sick of this. Question 26, I only have a few to go. And you slack off, you don't maintain intensity. And you're like, well, gosh, why did I miss it? Notice when you're maintaining intensity and when you're not. When you do, and you're saying, look, I don't get this choice yet, right? I don't fully understand this choice, or, I don't really get this, but I'm going to choose an answer. You can't be that way. You got to maintain intensity the whole way through your practice questions, the whole way through your prep, and especially when you're taking a test. Tell you what, you want to go from V35 to V41, try maintaining intensity, okay? Okay, and we're always shooting for extremely high accuracy, same type of thing. Look, when you're doing your practice questions, I did the, I don't know who might have seen it already. I met with Dalal, who drove her score from 250 to 780 through GMAT prep, partly by using target test prep. And one thing she said, well, how did you go from 250 to 780? Well, she said, I wasn't satisfied with anything under 90% accuracy. Why would I? 90, 95%. Why not shoot for that? Shooting for high accuracy when you're practicing, just make a complete priority. When you're practicing, shoot for extremely high accuracy, right? Why shoot for anything less? Why would you miss this question? Why would you miss, if let's say you do a set of 10 questions, why would you miss question number 8? You didn't miss the first 7. What's going on? Figure it out and get to that high accuracy, okay? And that is going to get you to a high score, being totally shooting for extremely high accuracy. Finally, we're always problem solving and improving. This is the name of the game in any success story, right? And of course, it's the same thing in the GMAT. You're constantly improving. You're constantly problem solving. You're saying, if your score hits a plateau, you pull new levers. If you can't get a certain type of critical reasoning question correct, you pull new levers. You can keep driving your verbal score higher and higher, whether it's reading comprehension, I don't know, some kind of function questions you don't see. How can I solve this problem, right? I'm not finishing this verbal section on time. How do I solve this problem? Find ways, right? Don't accept anything. Don't listen to experts or naysayers or anyone else. You're constantly problem solving and improving. Okay. So now, having thought about this, right? We've seen this thinking. And one more type of thinking we have to keep in mind is the overall thinking about the GMAT verbal section. And that is that it's not a test for the 8th grade. I mean, we all know that, but sometimes it's easy to start thinking, well, I can use gimmicky methods. I can do some simple hacks to nail this section. No, we have to be pretty sophisticated about how we handle the verbal section itself, right? Got to think this is a test for graduate school. So even though the verbal section is all about words and sentences and these little arguments, what could be so hard? Well, it's a test for admission to graduate school. So it's probably going to be a little more sophisticated than eliminating choices for basic little reasons like they have an extreme choice, extreme wording, it has the words don't match the passage. It's not going to be like that. So a key type of thinking we need to do here to nail the verbal section is think about it in a sophisticated way. Okay. So now, here's the key thing. Anyone can be shocked, stumped, or confused by a question, okay? I sit down with students, and we're both looking at a question and we both go, oh my gosh, what is that? We both don't know what the answer is. All 5 answer choices look correct, right? This happens in reading comprehension. You look at it and all 5 choices look correct. Or in sentence correction, you see the whole thing is underlined. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? Is this long? And it's all underlined, right? Anyone can feel like that. But the key question of a V51 score that we're all going to be is, how can I get this done? What can I do, right? And so what do? Well, we have all these beliefs, right? We have this foundation of beliefs. So we believe we can learn anything, do anything, understand anything. We can figure things out. Details matter. So we use those beliefs and we start pounding on this question. Okay? If it's a critical reasoning question, we go back to the passage, go to the answer choices, go to the passage, go to the answer choices. We're relentless, right? Reading comprehension, same thing. You go to the reading comprehension passage, you look for the information, you go to the answer choices, and what do? You make incremental success, okay? Make incremental success. So maybe you can get rid of one choice. In sentence correction, maybe there's one answer choice that you can eliminate because you find a grammatical error, an easy out choice, right? You get rid of one choice, incremental success. You know why? Because you're relentless and you believe you can get it done. You believe in yourself and you're going to figure out a way to get it done. And then you eliminate a second choice and your third choice, right? And finally, you're down to those last two choices. And you stick with them and you don't guess between them because you're relentless. You want to understand. You want to make sure everything's going on. You have a whole mentality for this, and you want to really articulate what's going on with the choices. And finally, you see it and you nail it. And that's how you do one question after another, whether you're practicing or taking the test. How can I get this done? And you get it done. You believe you can, and you make it happen. Okay. So with that, let's hit some questions to see how this all can apply. Okay, we're going to go through some questions, and remember, learning concepts is just the beginning. We have to learn to explain every choice, right? Learn to explain when you're practicing, okay? To master GMAT Verbal, you want to learn to explain every choice. So when we go through these questions, don't just go through the question and try to figure out what's right. And if you kind of get there, okay, learn to explain every choice. Finally, when we want to master GMAT Verbal, we have to learn to execute flawlessly, right? It's huge. So, okay, we're going to learn the concept, yes, but we have to learn to apply those concepts, learn to explain every choice. And finally, we're going to learn to execute flawlessly. And this means practice on time. So when we do these questions, you know, seek to execute flawlessly. I have a couple of really tricky questions here today to work through. Okay, a couple of really tricky questions. So you're going to have to execute flawlessly to get these correct. And remember that little inner voice. Say, what's my little inner voice saying? Have I really figured this out? Did I really go through these choices? Are there a couple choices that still could be correct that I eliminated? What's going on? Listen to that little inner voice and see how it goes with these questions. So, and if everyone could, you could put your answers in the chat for this question. But if you could just wait for a couple minutes, give everybody a chance to answer it. You know, 1 or 2 minutes before you might have seen the question already, or you maybe for some reason think you see what's correct real quick. Just give everybody about 2 minutes to go through the question on their own without being influenced with each other. That'd be great. Got a few different opinions coming in. Any others? Okay, let's go through this and thinking about it. Think about it like a V51 scorer and all the ways we talked about, right? We're going to go through, make incremental wins. We're going to figure out, do some easy outs, whatever we can do. The job is to get this done. And we're also going to very carefully articulate what's going on in each choice. So the first thing we do when we read a sentence correction question is read the entire thing so that we really get a sense of, we don't just focus on the answer choices, right? So in astronomy, the red shift denotes the extent to which light from a distant galaxy has shifted toward the red or long wave end of the light spectrum by the rapid motion of the galaxy away from Earth. Okay, so it's something about the red shift and it's shifting toward the red or long wave end of the spectrum. And let's go through some of these choices. The first choice, I don't know, that denotes the extent to which the light from a distant galaxy has shifted toward the red or long wave end of the light spectrum. I don't see anything particularly wrong with that. So I'm going to say that's not an easy out choice, right? So we're trying to really nail these questions, but we also have to kind of acknowledge our limitations and say, look, why not get rid of the easy outs first to enable ourselves to perform in the best level for the harder choices to eliminate. But B, the extent to which light from a distant galaxy has been shifted. Looks kind of the same. It sort of seems to work. It's passive voice. I'm not sure if I like it. Is there anything we can get rid of easily here? Let's look at choice C. The extent that light from a distant galaxy has shifted. Okay. Now, if we're thinking a real sophisticated level about choice C, denotes the extent that light has shifted. Does that really make sense? The extent that light has shifted? So did the light shift an extent? Because this would be a relative clause, right? The extent that light has shifted. So the extent that light has shifted. So light shifted the extent, that jumps out at me as wrong. So we can get rid of choice C. Okay. How about choice D? The extent of light from a distant galaxy shifting. So the red shifts denotes the extent of light from a distant galaxy shifting. So it's the extent of the light. You see what we're doing here? We're articulating very clearly. So all these choices, by the way, are grammatically correct, aren't they? So we're not getting rid of them on basic grammar issues. We really have to articulate what's wrong with each choice. And this is thinking like a V40 to V51 score, is to really articulate what's going on with these choices. So the term, the red shift, denotes the extent of light shifting. And, you notice I'm eliminating that from a distant galaxy modifier just to simplify. So it's the extent of light shifting toward so it's the extent of light and the extent is shifting. That doesn't make sense. The extent wouldn't shift toward the long way. Okay. How about E? In astronomy, the term the red shift denotes the extent of the shift of light from a distant galaxy toward the red or long wave end of the spectrum. Now, this is a little harder to eliminate. So I'm looking at choices A and B, and they both look super correct. They both look, the extent to which light has shifted and the extent to which light from a distant galaxy has been shifted. They're basically the same, except one is active voice, has shifted. The other one is has been shifted. I'm going to, let's take another look. So that's a red flag. It's yellow. It's a little yellow flag telling me, well, one of these choices is probably right. So what's going on? Let's listen to that little inner voice and say, what's going on with E? The extent of the shift of light from a distant galaxy toward the red or long wave end of the spectrum. So the shift of light is shifting from a galaxy toward the end of the spectrum. You see how we're articulating exactly what's going on there. So this version says that the extent of the shift from a galaxy toward the spectrum, the end of the spectrum. And once again, I simplified. I got rid of or long wave, the red or long wave part, right? Just simplify so we get to what matters. And what matters is always huge. We have to figure out, if you want to nail this test, think about what matters. So the extent of light from a distant galaxy shifting from you know, from a galaxy, we're shifting is of the shift, excuse me, the extent of the shift of light from a galaxy to the long range, to the end of the spectrum. That doesn't make sense. We're not going to shift from a galaxy to a spectrum. So let's look, we're down to A and B. Okay, so what do we see going on here? One is passive and one is active. And if we've listened to the wrong experts, or we've listened to the wrong people, we've heard that passive voice is always, you know, is generally wrong, and we just choose the active voice version, right? So, okay, we go with A. Light, the extent to which light from a distant galaxy has shifted toward the long, sounds good. We do it, we're done. But what do we want to do if we want to be a V51 scorer? We have a little inner voice saying, did I really analyze this? Or also, should I really necessarily pay attention to such a simple thing as passive voice is always wrong, because this is a test for graduate school. So something so simple probably won't work. It's a good chance it won't work a lot of the time. So that little inner voice is giving us a yellow flag saying, no, I really have to think about these choices more carefully. And if you want to nail verbal, listening to the inner voice is going to be huge. So what is it telling us? We really have to look at these. And what do? We bounce back to the stem, right? Constantly bouncing from the passage to the answer choices, from the stem to the answer choices, whatever you have to do to see, you know, you're going to be relentless, right? So let's be relentless. Go through the whole thing. The astronomy, the redshift denotes the extent to which light from a distant galaxy has shifted toward the red or long wave end of the spectrum by the rapid motion. So it has shifted by the rapid motion. Now I see what's going on. How about has been shifted by the rapid motion? Makes complete sense. So this by the rapid motion there toward the end of the sentence is signaling that A doesn't make sense, because we wouldn't say has shifted by the rapid motion, right? So even though it's active voice, it's wrong. And what's really correct is the passive voice B. Now, of course, this is just one question, and the point is not the explanation of this particular question. The point is the general mentality we took, right? The point is the general mentality. Number one, we believe we can get this done. We start looking for ways to make it happen. We made incremental wins, right? I got rid of some easy choices, okay? You get rid of the easier to get rid of choices, and then you're about to pick choice A, but you're carefully articulating what's going on here, right? You're carefully articulating why one choice is wrong and the other choice is right, and you're like, well, I don't really have a good reason. I just said one is passive and the other is active, just because somebody said that, but I have to evaluate what people say. Be super careful here, listen to my little inner voice and go, I haven't really done this right yet. And then you go back and be relentless, read the entire sentence and figure out from the non-underlined portion what's going on. And that type of execution is how you get to a high verbal score. Are there any questions about this one? There is at least one. What's the level of this question? This is one of the hardest sentence correction questions around. So it's a 700 level. We could basically call it a V51 level question. And you know what? The funny thing is, if you look at it, this sentence is pretty clear. The extent to which light from a distant galaxy has been shifted. So what makes it a V51 question? They put the by all the way here after spectrum, right, toward the end of the sentence. So if you didn't listen to that little inner voice and go, well, I don't know really why A is better than B, I just went with passive versus active, then you easily get smoked by this question. But it's not that crazy hard. That's a lot of it right there, right? It's just executing well and listening to that little inner voice that says, I haven't really done this right yet, okay? Any other questions about this question? Okay, if you have more, you can always put them in the chat and we can get back to them. And let's do the same thing with the critical reasoning question, you know, and we're going to do the same type of thing. We're going to use sophisticated thinking, right? V51 level thinking. We're not going to just eliminate choices because they don't sound like the passage. We're not going to just pick a choice because it sounds like the passage. We're not going to just look for what's relevant versus what's irrelevant, because maybe 3 choices in a critical reasoning question are relevant, right? Or what makes something irrelevant? How do you know it's irrelevant? We're going to be sophisticated about this. I want you to look at it very carefully and bounce back to the passage and really listen to that inner voice and say, look, have I really done this well enough? Do I really understand every choice? And think like a V51 scorer that you can get this done, you can make it happen, you can get this question correct. And please hold off on putting your answers into the chat. It's a challenging question. I'd like everybody to get the challenge of this question before they get the answer from somebody else. Okay, we got one thought. Any other intrepid V51 scorers? Be so careful with this. Think about what every choice does, and we'll go through it. Maybe one more minute on this. So what's correct here? Let's go through this question, see what's going on. And we're going to think about this in a very sophisticated way, the way you need to think about it to really nail GMAT Verbal. So to get people who have been reluctant to reduce or eliminate their consumption of meat to move to following plant-based diets, the Magical Meat Company has developed meat-like products that are pea and rice protein based. I don't know if this is going to matter, but I just want to point out that so this first sentence shows their purpose. They're to get people who have been reluctant to reduce or eliminate their consumption of meat. Okay, so it gives a purpose. This is probably some kind of detail. And these products are meat-like products. They're pea and rice protein based. So there's, the details here. They've done it for a reason. And what have they done? They've developed products. That's all this sentence is saying so far. So that's the kind of thing we need to notice. What matters here? Okay, the company's founders are confident that, this sounds like a conclusion company, doesn't it? Once Magical Meats products are widely available, many people who would not have otherwise done so in the short term will make the switch to plant-based diets. So they're confident that people are going to switch to plant-based diets once Magical Meats products are available. Because the difference, why? Because the difference between the appearance, taste, and feel of Magical Meats product and those of meat is minimal. Okay, so after we read the passage, we go to the stem. Which of the following, if true, provides the most support for the expectation of the founders of magical meat? Okay, so when we see that, this is basic execution. We need to go back and find that expectation, right? And doing these little things right makes a huge difference. These little steps, if you learn strategies for critical reasoning while you're preparing for the GMAT, it just really helps to know these little steps. And one of them is to go back to find the conclusion. So the company's founders are confident that once Magical Meats products are available, many people who would not have otherwise done so in the short term will make the switch to plant-based diets. That's what the expectation is, that we need more support for. The people will switch, okay, once the products are available. That whole sentence is the conclusion. And the support is because the difference between the appearance, taste, and feel of Magical Meats products with those of meat is minimal. Now, here's the thing. You can do an easy critical reasoning question, 600 level or 500 level critical reasoning question, just by going through the choices and sort of skimming through them and seeing what looks relevant and what doesn't look what looks relevant, and maybe even just going by feel. But if we're going to think like a V51 score, we have to be way more sophisticated than that. And we really have to figure out what the relationship between each of these choices and the passage is. And we're going to have to, this question is so tricky. We're going to have to bounce back to the passage, bounce back to the choices, really listen to that little inner voice and go, am I really right here? So let's look at choice A. Magical Meat has been able to make its products appear, taste, and feel minimally different from meat because of certain properties of coconut oil and cocoa butter. This choice is so tempting because okay, great. They've been able to make their products minimally different from meat. This sounds like a strengthener, but I have a question. What is your little inner voice? What's your little inner voice telling you about this choice? Or what should it be telling you about this choice? Because this choice isn't correct, choice A. Any ideas? What does this choice do? It's too easy. Well, there's your little inner voice telling you that choice A is too easy. Yes, and Swapna has it as well. It's more of a fact already in the argument. What does this choice do? Choice A explains something that we already know. The taste and feel of Magical Meats products and those of meat, the difference is minimal. So it shows how they did it, right? And this is the kind of thinking you want to use, because this certainly feels like a strengthener. So if we're going by feel or what's relevant, I mean, we could say it's relevant. It completely explains how they did it. Or not completely, but anyway, it explains how they did it. They used certain properties of coconut oil and cocoa butter to make them taste and feel minimal. Difference between the taste and feel minimal. So it gives us a reason why. So this is the kind of thinking you want to do, because it certainly feels like a strengthener. It looks like a strengthener. It certainly feels relevant. It matches the wording of the passage. But a little inner voice is telling us, wait, there's something about this. And what do? Bounce back to the passage, right? Take that win. I'm just going to be relentless. Look, we're not doing anything crazy here. We're just being relentless and saying, I'm going to bounce back to the passage and check this because it certainly feels easy. Oh, wait, it's just explaining we already know. It already says there's this difference is minimal. How about B? Much of the reason why people are reluctant to switch from diets, including meat, to plant-based diets, is that they are convinced that all plant-based foods contain inadequate quantities of protein. This is another one that sounds a lot like the passage, but is it correct? And if it is or not, tell me why. What do you think is going on with this choice? Yeah, it's reverse logic. So what do you mean, Sam, by reverse logic? What's going on with this choice? Like, what do we have to do to think about this choice? What do we have to notice? And this is not going to be, a lot of people choose this choice. In fact, about as many people choose this choice as the correct answer. So what is wrong with this choice? What do we need to notice? We want to be sophisticated about it. Okay, well, somebody's asking me a great question. Marty, sometimes in 600 level questions, strengtheners are kind of rephrasing the premise conclusion. How do we get out of that mindset? They aren't really rephrasing. at least in an official question, in a good question, in a well-written question, they won't rephrase the conclusion. So the way to get out of that mindset is to say, look, I can't be using simplistic thinking in 600. Yeah, simplistic thinking will get you to the correct answer to a 600 level question, but you can't be doing that when you're doing 600 level questions. In fact, you know what's really cool that I've noticed? That even the easy questions that everybody gets correct, the choices are so cool. The questions are so interesting. The reasons for the incorrect choices are so interesting. I've seen sentence correction questions, 90% of people get them correct. But if you look at the incorrect answers, they're so intricate and so interesting. You don't even maybe notice it because they're so easy to get correct. So you can do the same thing with 600 level questions, right? Be very careful and do the same type of thinking with 600 level questions. Like I said, what is one of the qualities of a V51 score is you refuse not to understand everything. So even if you're doing a 600 level question, make sure you understand why every choice is correct or incorrect. Don't just go with, yeah, well, it does rephrase it. Yeah, I got it correct. Great. Is that V51 level thinking? No, right? When you're preparing for the GMAT and you want to nail this thing, then even when you're doing the easy questions, make sure you don't just try to get them correct. Make sure you understand every single answer choice. Okay. Someone wants to know what the correct answer is. We'll get there. Okay, so B. The reason why B is incorrect, as somebody said, it's actually a weakener. Because their plan, remember what their plan, let's go back to the passage and think about this, because we have to bounce back and see what's going on. It says that their plan is just as they develop meat-like products that are rice and pea and rice protein based. Does it say that they're going to tell anybody about that? You know, they don't know one way or the other. Whether people in general who are convinced that all plant-based foods contain inadequate quantities of protein. Does the passage say anything about convincing them differently? No, so the plan has nothing to do with that. If anything, this choice weakens the argument. Because even though this is pea and rice protein based, and even though the taste and feel difference is minimal, okay, this weakens the argument. So this is the type of thinking we need to do. Yeah, this looks like it says protein. The passage says protein. The passage says they're going to use. But then we have to look at these key details and go, wait a minute, does it say anything about like they're being convinced? How are they going to be convinced different? All it says, and this is the key, this is the type of thinking we need to do to get a V51 level question correct, is go, it doesn't say convincing them different. All it says is that they're pea and rice protein based, and there's a gap between those two things, right? There's a big gap between just the fact that they're based on this and people being convinced of it. Okay, how about D? People have already switched to plant-based diets, prefer Magical Meats products to other similar products. Okay, so people have already switched. Okay, they like it better. Well, what about the people who haven't switched? This is about convincing people to switch, right? These people have already switched. So of all these choices, if anybody, if we're going to go versus scope versus out of scope, or relevant versus irrelevant, basically the fact that people have already switched like this product better doesn't really have that much to do with people who have been reluctant to switch, being convinced to switch because the taste and appearance is minimal. The taste and appearance difference is minimal. So D is practically irrelevant. How about E? Pea protein and rice protein are readily available in great quantities. So Magical Meat will be able to produce as much of its products as necessary to make them widely available. Okay, so what does this choice do? What does this choice do? Well, it tells us that the pea and rice protein are available in great quantities, but what's the conclusion? It looks very important, but let's bounce back to the passage. It says, once the product's available, they're confident that once the products are available, people will switch. So that assumes that their conclusion assumes that the products are already available. See that? Once the products are available, people will switch. So are they saying that they're going to be available? No, they're not. Okay, the assumption is that they will be available. So we don't really care that they're going to be available in quantities. Their entire point is once we figure this out, people will switch. Like once we build a bridge, we'll make more revenue. That doesn't mean that we're going to build a bridge. It means if we build a bridge or if we have the availability, we'll have this, right? So we're looking for these very carefully. So far, we found one that explains. It's not relevant or irrelevant. We're not thinking about relevant versus irrelevant. We saw that A explains. B. Is it relevant or irrelevant? It's totally relevant. It weakens. Okay? We're being relentless here and so careful. And we notice, yeah, it says pea and rice protein, but it weakens. Right? So B is incorrect because it weakens. It's certainly not irrelevant. Destroys the argument. Or it really harms the argument. Okay? Yeah, D is irrelevant. And this one is supporting the wrong conclusion. E supports the absolute wrong conclusion. It's supporting the conclusion that the products will be available. Okay, but we don't need to support E because we don't need E to that support because they're assuming that once the products are available, that the consumers will switch. And this is saying they will be available. It's kind of like I said, if we assume if we build this bridge, we'll make more revenue from tolls. The fact that we build a bridge doesn't say what's going to happen if we build a bridge. So this is about what happens if it's available. We're not, and this supporting a different conclusion that it will be available. And this is the key type of difference we need to see to really nail GMAT Verbal, right? So as you prepare for critical reasoning, you really want to think about these kinds of things, okay? Yeah, E is solving the wrong thing. Can I say that an action that is closer to the conclusion is a better answer choice? Is that V51 thinking? What do you think? It's just closer? I think it's a good, interesting pattern to see. It's an interesting pattern. I like it. But I don't think we can necessarily go with that. I'd rather see exactly what's going on. And in this case, E is out because we don't need that support. Their conclusion is once the products are available, this is going to happen. E is saying the products will be available. Well, we're assuming in the conclusion that the products will be available. So we don't need to further support that. It's kind of like, it's irrelevant. Okay. E doesn't support it supports our belief that the plan is going to work, but you have to be so specific to think like a V51 scorer, right? Have to be so specific. And the conclusion is once they're available, we'll get this result. And this is saying they will be available. Okay, fine. What about C? Digestive problems that many people experience after consuming whole peas are not often experienced by people who have consumed pea protein. What E does is it rules out a possible issue that could have wrecked the whole thing. And this is what, this convinces us a little more, right? You're saying, look, what if someone told you this? Well, I'm going to do this magical meat and it's pea and rice protein. You're like, man, are there any issues with that? I'm not sure this is going to work. Some people have digestive problems with eating whole peas, and you could say, oh, they don't have that. So then I'm a little more convinced. So one way the GMAT critical reasoning arguments are strengthened is by choices that rule out a possible issue. So C does just that. C rules out a possible issue and strengthens the argument, okay? It doesn't explain it, and it doesn't say that it won't harm them. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But it's a little different from B because it does show that the issue is not solved by B at all. We know it's not solved. And we know that D, we don't know that these people are going to know. But here's the difference. The protein issue is already in the passage, okay? So B doesn't really do anything new in terms of the protein issue. But this thing about the digestive problems is not already in the passage. This is another issue that hasn't been addressed in any way, okay? So we're getting there. So anyway, the main point here is how careful we have to be. And this is from the Target Test Prep course. This is a question from the course. It's one of the hardest ones. Is it V51 level question. And you can see the subtlety of the answer choices. And this is the kind of stuff you run into in V51 level questions, is that the answer, everything is so subtle. You have to be so careful. You got to bounce back to the passage. You got to be relentless. And you really, really, really have to listen to that little inner voice, okay? And when you're practicing, you can see what we did. We explained every choice so carefully. We saw exactly what's going on. We didn't say, well, it doesn't look right. It's irrelevant. Look, you know, okay, I mean, you could sort of eliminate A by saying, well, it seems a little too easy, or maybe even B, but that's not what we're going to do. Okay, that's not how we're going to go through these questions. So this, I think you're getting the idea of how to score, you know, at a high level in verbal. You have to be so relentless and specific and careful, and really believe in yourself, and just nail every little thing and execute so well. So let's go through some of the key themes we've been talking about here. One, we saw attention to detail, right? The difference between having protein and convincing people there's protein are two majorly different things. We have to pay attention to that detail, okay? Okay, so before we go on, someone's asking, don't I think C is out of scope? C is absolutely out of scope. I mean, in a way, it brings up a whole new thing. But isn't that the way we're going to strengthen an argument? Like, the difference between the taste and appearance is minimal. What's my conclusion? People are going to switch. Well, and what if I go, well, I don't know, man, you know, what if there's digestive issues with this? I don't think people are going to switch. You go, actually, there are. And you go, oh, wow, I'm even more convinced than I was before. So new information does. New information is what strengthens an argument. New information supports the expectation of the founders of Magical Meat. Is this new information helps to support their expectation? It absolutely does it, you know. The passage says there's protein content. The passage says the appearance, taste, and feel of Magical Meat is minimal, right? But it doesn't say that this stuff doesn't make people sick, okay? B feels more acceptable, but it's really not. It actually weakens the argument. Okay, so let's continue. Relentless, so second, relentless pursuit of understanding, like you're doing right here. You're arguing with me. What do I have to understand? And I'm not trusting that expert who says that C is the correct answer. I'm going to say that B is the correct answer, okay? Can you know what, does it take years to develop this mindset? I mean, to get to the level of seeing exactly, to a degree. But, you know, if you're pursuing that mindset, and you're shooting for that mindset, you're going to get a long way toward that mindset. And I'm telling you, do the questions on time. Really think about every question. I see people doing 30 questions, 30 verbal questions a day. Do 10 a day. Go, because all 5 answer choices have so much information, so much to learn from. If you do 10 verbal questions in a day, you're practically doing 50 verbal questions in a day, right? You know, and you'll get it. The more you the more you think about, and once you start thinking that you need to think in this way, and even when you're doing 600 level questions that are pretty clear and not that hard to analyze, once you're thinking that you need to think in this way, then you will start thinking in this way. And the other thing is, you know, to score high in the test, the key thing is getting medium questions correct. If you can get 90 to 100% of the medium questions correct, not like that insanely hard one, 90% of the medium one, and then put some hard ones on top of it, that gets you deep into the 40s on verbal, okay? Getting medium questions correct is really the foundation of nailing GMAT, the GMAT on quant and verbal, okay? So get those medium questions correct, okay? Now, you saw another theme was intensity and care and execution. We have to be so careful. And to see how intense we have to be, it's so easy to go, oh, like in that sentence correction question, it's so easy to choose A. And by the way, I rewrote that one. If you've seen it before, I adjusted a little bit, so it won't be the same if you see it again. So if you see it again, just don't automatically think you know the answer. It's a little different from what I did. But anyway, we have to be so careful with our execution, right? And you'll see this in the explanations in the target test prep course, that even the explanations are so thorough and so careful. So you really get the kind of thinking you need to master GMAT verbal. Okay, another incremental wins. Okay, that's another thing we can do here. We didn't do it so much in the critical reasoning question, but we did it in the sentence correction question. You know, and you can do this constantly. Look, whether you're preparing for the GMAT or you're answering a practice question, you can win incrementally. Take care of the easy outs. Do what's easy for you. Get some stuff done. Learn something. Give yourself some confidence. Make some progress. Make some incremental wins, you know? And this is the type of thinking for a V51 scorer. Look, I made some progress. And I'm bringing up Dalal again, but it was so interesting to me. She went from 250 on her first GMAT to 350 on her second one. To her, that was an incremental win. I said, well, what made you go on? She said, well, I was making progress. And think that way with any question. Incrementally win. Did I understand a little better? Even if you got these questions wrong today, you learned something, right? You have an incremental win. Okay. And finally, a huge thing with the GMAT. The GMAT is a test of skill and getting things done. So much of this is going to be about figuring out how to get things done, whether it's a quant or a verbal question on the GMAT. As you're preparing, think about, look, I have to learn to figure out how to get things done, you know? And that, I mean, and do you see, okay, so the whole thing is coming together here, that you believe in yourself, you believe you can solve things, you have a certain mentality, you have beliefs that work for you, it all builds a foundation, and you get into a virtuous cycle. Like you said, well, someone was asking just now, can I get this done? Yeah, you can. You can develop it, and you take the attitude, and the answer is maybe you don't get to the level of somebody who's been doing this for 10 years, but you can get to a very high level because you're going to start doing it right, and you're just going to keep making progress. And gee, if I get all the medium questions correct, I'm looking pretty good, right? So figuring out these incremental wins, how am I going to get done? How am I going to get to my score goal? And the main theme here is that effective GMAT preparation works, okay? You're going to get it done, whether you're having trouble with reading comprehension questions, whether you're a non-native speaker of English, whatever it takes. I've seen people whose English, you know, their writing is they leave out words and all kinds of stuff. And then, oh my gosh, I scored 47 on the verbal section of the test because they figured out how to prepare for effectively. They figured out how to execute, and they did all these things we're talking about, okay? And of course, you know, we see this with our target test prep users all the time. You know, people going, you know, from just getting these crazy score goals. We hear about it all the time. And it's just the thoroughness of how they prepare. And it's not just the course, you know, it's how they use the course. I see people going through and just spending a lot of time in the questions and coming on the chat and making sure they get things. And when if you bog down, look, people, if you're using the target test prep course and you're not getting your results, come to us earlier rather than later and say, look, you know, I'm not hitting my accuracies. What do I have to do? You know, because how you prepare is so important. How you answer each practice question. You saw what we did here. If you're not doing that, you're not going to be making progress. You go, what's going on? I'm not getting my accuracies. Okay. Well, you know, figure out why and read the strategy lessons in the course and figure out how to prepare effectively so that you just drive your score up, because effective preparation is so key, whether you're using the target test prep course, whatever you're doing, you got to prepare effectively. And there's one more thing. Okay. This course is on sale right now. We're offering it through tomorrow. We're offering it for 20% off. You know, so yeah, you can use this the code GMAT20 for the next couple of days. Get 20% off if you get the full 6-month plan. That's a pretty huge discount. But in any case, 20% off is a nice discount that you can get on the course. So if you want to use the course, you know, check it out. Try the 5-day trial and see what you think. You'll see how thorough it is and how it takes you through the type of thinking we were talking about today. So anyway, it was really fun. I hope you all got something out of this. I always like talking about this stuff because it's just so fun to figure out how to take things to another level. So with that, I wish you all a good rest of your day. Really appreciate it. Good night, good day. Have a good rest of your week. Happy rest of the year. And may your studying go well.